What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. If you're new, please hit that subscribe button. In this one, we are going to finally do the springs, front and rear. We are going to do an alignment, and we are going to corner balance the car. Alright, so we're going to do a little math again to figure out how much to move our spring perches. We did all this math an episode or two ago to figure out what spring rates we wanted. So go back and watch that if you want to make sense of all this. So, alright, good enough. So we're going to use our same corner weights. We're just going to say, we're just going to average this out to 800. So 800 pounds on a corner divided by our 550 spring is what we originally had. And keep in mind, this time we're just using static weight to help us with ride height and corner balance. We're not taking aero loading into consideration on this one. So that is 1.45 inches of compression. The same 800 pounds divided by the new 750 springs. It's 1.06 inches of compression for a difference of 0.39 inches. So on the front, you can measure how much one turn adds height-wise. You can just use like a micrometer like this or something. My particular setup, the front, one turn equals 1/8 of an inch or 0.125 inches. So we take this 0.39 divided by 1/8 of an inch per turn, and that's 3.12, oops, I'm sorry, 3.12 turns down. Since it's a stiffer spring, the car is obviously going to be higher, so that's why we want to go down with it. The rear gets a little bit trickier. We're going to average these two out at 640 divided by our old 300 springs, and that's 2.13 inches of compression. The same 640 divided by the new 400 pound springs is 1.6 inches of compression for a difference of 0.53 inches. Now, the reason it gets a little bit tricky, the new springs are 1 inch shorter than the old ones. The new ones are an 8-inch tall spring, the old ones were a 9-inch. So we need to take 1 inch off of that, and we're basically end up with a negative 0.47 inches. The rear coilover on my car, one turn is a 1/16 of an inch. So one turn on the rear is 0.0625 inches. That's a 1/16 of an inch. So the 0.47 inches divided by 0.0625 per turn equals 7.52 turns. We need to go up on the rear because the spring is shorter. So there you go. With this math, we have a good starting point of how much we want to turn our perches to maintain that ride height and maintain that corner balance. So coming up, when we finally drop the car down and corner balance it, we'll get to see if we're close or not. So yeah, hopefully this kind of helped you guys out. Alright guys, so here's the new springs that are going to be going on. We're putting 750s on to replace the 550s that are on it. We pretty much have the full Maximum Motorsports setup on here. If you undo the nut on the top of the strut, you can actually kind of compress it by hand enough to pull it out to the outside of the fender, pull that spring off, plop the new one on, and put it back in, and you technically don't need to do an alignment. We're gonna do it anyways just because I haven't done it since last season. So yeah, let's get to it. Alright guys, I misspoke a little bit earlier saying you needed to undo the tie rod end. That can stay. My brake duct was holding me up. The brake line was kind of getting a little bit close to snagging, and we had to undo the sway bar end link because when it drooped so much, it was binding up on us. But then once you do that, you can basically compress the strut enough to get past this little lip and then bring it all the way outside of the fender, as you saw under time lapse. The other thing we did while we were in here was we put in a harder bump stop as well. When you really start playing with aero, and my car doesn't have much compression distance, I guess I'll call it, the bump stops should kind of help to keep the splitter from dragging on the ground quite as much. So hopefully that'll be a step in the right direction. The springs will definitely be a step in the right direction, but again, this is kind of a learning curve for us as well, messing with, you know, this much aero. So yeah, there's definitely gonna be some changes down the road. Exactly what, we're not quite sure. So, you know, first race is when we'll kind of figure all that stuff out. All right guys, so the rear is done already. We just got to put the top nuts on in the trunk. Off camera, I'm going to go over all the nuts and bolts that I did, just because recording, sometimes I might be jumping around doing stuff. And under time lapse, it probably happened really quick, but the new springs in the rear are an inch shorter than the old ones, but they're stiffer. So we're going to do a little bit of math to figure out how much to move the perch to get us back to our original ride height. And then once we do that, then it's double check the alignment and corner balance. All right, so now that we know how many turns we have to go, now we just have to, there we go. Now we just have to end up moving the perch. I have the Maximum Motorsports coilovers on Coney shocks. So they just have a little Allen head lock nut right here. So just loosen that a little bit. Other setups, you might have like a locking collar and then the perch, but you should be able to figure it out. And then if you remember from the math, we need to go down 3.1 turns. So we'll just count that as the starting point. There's one, there's two, coming up on three. So we'll call that 3, give it a tiny bit, 3.1, good. And I just did that one-handed because I'm holding the camera right now too. We'll tighten it up just so we don't forget, but when we corner balance this, we might have to come back in and move it a little bit. Onto the rear. All right, so the rears are very similar. They just sit on the strut, so they actually just like free spin. But same thing with a locking set screw. I'm gonna have to put the camera down because I have to hold the collar while I move the perch up 7.5 turns. So we'll get to that in a second. One, two, three, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm going to look for it around the back. Okay. Now we're just going to move the whole collar. and tighten her up. There we go. So, alright, so now that we set the perches, you know, when we put it down, we should be pretty close to our original ride heights. So that way, corner balance, we should just have to do a little adjustment on 1 or 2 corners and be back to where we were. Alright guys, this is literally my first like take at this. This isn't like any like camera trickery or taking different cuts or anything. And ready, look. 50.3, if I bounce around it'll move a little bit. So 50. That's pretty good. So it goes to show that the math that we did earlier pretty much got us right there. Let's check our ride height. I mean, shoot, if the ride heights are good, that's it, we're done. That'd be awesome. Alright guys, here's the rear. We came up, shoot, only 1/8 of an inch, and these are new springs, so they might settle. The ones in the springs in the front were used, so they're already kind of settled a little bit. So let's check the other side. Maybe up like a 1/8 or a 1/4. So we're on right front. Holy crap, look at that. Right front, dead on 27. And then left front is maybe 1/8 low, because it was 27, now it's 26 and 7/8, we'll call it. So that's pretty good. I'm actually probably not going to touch it because the corner balance is so good. If I were to do anything, I would maybe add a 1/2 turn to the front left. Yeah, because if you look, the front left is a little bit light. So if I added a turn, it would put more weight on that corner and help us out a tiny bit. But yeah, all things considered, doing spring changes and even a spring height change, being that close right off the bat is awesome. So hope this kind of helped you guys out. Alright, so I thought about it for a second. I'm going to add about 1/2 turn to the front left. And that's it. Alright, so to adjust this specific setup, there's a lock nut right here, a grub screw. Loosen him up, and we want 1/2 turn, so let's bottom him out. So we want the perch to go up, so we're going to go around this way. As soon as it gets to the back, kind of just feeling for it right there. Gonna lock it down and double check it. Alright, so that's where we're gonna call this one. I went ahead and double checked the corner balance, everything's good. So first race is tomorrow actually, so we're gonna finish loading this thing up and get going to that. So if you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you want to keep up to date on the build, please subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one.